See, generally in cases of bailable offences, the bail application can be moved before a magistrate under section 436 of CRPC. If it is a non-bailable offence, it can be moved before a magistrate under section 437 of CRPC. And the High Court and the Session Courts have powers to entertain bail application under section 439 of CRPC. Now the confusion arises that, in some cases we see that the bail application is directly filed in the Session Court. So what happens is that there are, some special courts have been designated. For instance, we talk about the POCSO court, the CBI court, the Prevention of Corruption court, the PMLA courts, MPMLA courts. So those special courts are presided over by a judge who is of the cadre of additional session judge. So those bails will automatically go to that particular court. Now, what happens is that whenever in district courts you file the bail application, suppose you file it in registry, after that it is presented before the district judge after lunch hour, the fresh bail application, and then the district judge decides as to in which court the bail application shall be moved. So, if you want to move it before magistrate, you can move it, but generally what people do is, they, if it is a grave offence, it is a serious offence, and it falls within any special act, then they obviously file it before the session judge. That is the additional session judge, and even the district judge can hear the bail application until and unless it falls within any special law and a special court has been designated in that particular district for those cases. So herein we are dealing with a case wherein, first of all, herein the husband is the accused. So before we start with the main bail, I just want to, apprise you about the facts of the case, the FIR which have been given. So many of you were asking, in the class, and also, queries were made, how does an FIR looks? So this is how your FIR looks. As you can, as you can see it, this is how your FIR looks. I hope it is visible to everybody. So as you can all see that here in this, like you can all see over here, they have mentioned first information report under section 154 of CRPC. Thereafter you see the name of the district is written. That is, it was a case of Lucknow, so the name of the district has been written as Lucknow. Then you can see the name of the police station. And of course, time and place has also been written, because time and date plays a very important role in criminal cases, because criminal cases, bail, no doubt we say that it is the bail is a right and jail is an exception, but we should not forget that bail is the complete and sole discretion of the judge. Then after you can see under what sections they have been charged, the particular accused. So it is written Bhadasa, which is IPC. So here in UP they write the FIR in Hindi. So you can see the sections that have been written. IPC, section 498A and 304B, your cruelty and dowry death. And then of course the Dowry Prohibition Act, section 3 and 4. So these are the sections under which they have been charged. Now, what are the name of the complainant? Then you can see over here the name of the complainant is written. The father of the victim is the complainant in the instant case. Thereafter, they write about the name of the accused. So the entire, or to say the entire family of the accused, that is his father, mother, himself and his sisters, have been roped in. Then they write the content. So this is how they write an FIR. So I'll be reading it. So to generalize it, to summarize what they have mentioned in the FIR is that he has given a bit of a detail that his daughter got married to the accused, and so I will read it out in Hindi and then I'll explain it in English. That प्रार्थी ने अपनी पुत्री शिल्पा उर्फ गुंजा उम्री 32 वर्ष लगभग का विवाह निरंजन वर्मा, who is the accused in this case, पुत्र वीरेंद्र कुमार वर्मा, निवासी अलकापुरी, मकान नंबर 15, जानकीपुरम सोवेंसो के साथ 13 फरवरी 2016 को किया था। प्रार्थी ने विवाह में अपनी हैसियत के अनुसार दान दहेज दिया था, लेकिन विवाह के बाद से ही पुत्री के ससुराल पक्ष वाले, इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू नोट, ही इज सेइंग पुत्री के ससुराल पक्ष वाले, वेयरइन ही इज स्टेटिंग दैट हर इन-लॉज, द हस्बैंड्स नेम हैज नॉट कम ओवर हियर, अपनी हैसियत के अनुसार दान दहेज दिया। Thereafter, so what the contents state is that his daughter got married to the accused, and in the marriage, the complainant with his own consent has given some, we can say, a sort of gifts for his daughter, or we can often, दान दहेज अपनी मर्जी से दिया था, so he has given some sort of gifts to the family of the accused with his own consent. Thereafter, he is also stating that his daughter was subjected to harassment by the in-laws. The name of the husband has not come because the husband was working in Delhi. When he came to know about it, he told his wife that not to worry about it, everything will be alright. But when the things continued, when his harassment as narrated in the FIR by the in-laws continued, he left his job, came over here, started his own business. Now, what happened was that in the meanwhile, a daughter was born to them, and then they started, demanding the in-laws of the victim started demanding for a dowry of 10 lakh rupees, to which she stated that she is not economically sound to give it, and started harassing her. Then it is stated that on 2nd August 2017, in the evening, the victim called her mother and stated that she is being subjected to harassment when they are ill-treating her in the house. To which she said, "Don't worry, we will have a talk to them." Then, thereafter, on the very next day, on 3rd August 2017, somebody rang them up, the complainant, at the complainant's house, and told them that your daughter has been killed. They have given her the poison. Thereafter, they were charged with these offences and they have been in jail. Now, this was your FIR. Now, when we are drafting the bail application for in the instant case, as I've already pointed out, that that his father and mother were also charged, and they were when the charge sheet came, the similar charges came. No further charges were added in the charge sheet, so they are also in jail. Now, what is pertinent to note over here is that when the bail application, generally what happens in matrimonial disputes, especially in cases of dowry death, the bail of the husband is not generally granted at first instance. It takes a bit of time. But when it comes to the bail of the the in-laws, that is father-in-law or mother-in-law, the bail is generally granted. So what has happened in this case, that when the bail application was rejected by the lower court, therein after they moved to the high court, and the high court has allowed the bail application of the father-in-law and mother-in-law. We also have the bail application of the father-in-law and mother-in-law. So that is, I'll show you what exactly the grounds have been given. So whenever the court passes the order for the bail application, what generally happens is that it is a set pattern on which they just change the grounds on which the bail is being granted. So I'll show you how the bail orders are generally passed over here along its. So this is the bail application, this is the bail order. As you can all see, on the top the case number is written, the applicant's name, the counsel for the applicant, the name of the honorable judge who passes it, and then the order. So what they have relied upon is, so when you go through the bail order, I'll read out the para. It states that learned counsel for the applicant submits that the accused applicant has been falsely implicated in the case. It is further submitted that accused applicant, this is the bail application of the mother-in-law, which has been allowed by the court. The son is still languishing in jail. Of the deceased, no amount of dowry was ever made by the accused applicant. When the deceased started vomiting suddenly, she was taken to the Lohia hospital by her in-laws. And they were the ones who had given the information regarding her, being taken to the hospital. No specific role has been assigned to the accused applicant in the bail application. So, considering these facts and also considering the age of the mother-in-law and the father-in-law, the bail has been granted. And also important point is that they have had no criminal history. So, these bail application order, why I am quoting is because when one co-accused has been granted the bail, it plays a very important role in your bail applications for you to get the bail for your client. So now we will start with how we draft the bail application. We have discussed it time and again, so I'll discuss it again. So as you can all see, you can write over here. You write over here at the top, in the Honorable High Court of Judicature at Allahabad, Lucknow bench. So this case is being filed in Lucknow. So you have to write down Lucknow. Then you mention criminal miscellaneous case number. A lot of cases are filed and every case is given a specific number and obviously year. 2017, 18, whichever year, then you have to write the name of the accused. So in the instant case, the name of the accused is Niranjan Verma. Then you have to give his details. Then you write accused or applicant. You do not have to use the word petition. In bail applications, we call it bail applications. Therefore, we use the word the applicant, the counsel for the applicant. In case of petition, we use counsel for the petitioners. When it is an appeal, counsel for the appellant. Here it will be the counsel for the applicant. Then you write from which date he has been in jail. That is very important to mention because that also plays a pivotal role in getting the bail orders. Then of course the state of UP, because in criminal cases the party is always a state. Then you have to mention the crime number and the sections and the police station. All these information is given in your FIR. Then you are approaching the High Court. So when was the bail rejected by the session judge, that you have to mention, and also the bail application number. Then comes your index. So in the index you mention bail application, affidavit, and then come all your annexures, and then of course this the memo. You do not have to confuse because in some chambers they write everything on the affidavit, but in some they follow a different pattern. That depends upon the High Court rules of different states, and if it is passed, there is no problem. Main thing we have to focus is on how we draft it, what content should be included in it. So now you see, then of course again it comes the same pattern. Then you have to write first bail application. If it is obviously when you are approaching after the session judge, you have to mention the bail application under section 439. As already pointed out, that the bail application before the session judge and the High Court is passed under section 439 of CRPC. Thereafter you have to write, this is a very set pattern, the applicant prays that on consideration of the facts and reasons disclosed in the accompanying affidavit, he may be released on bail, and then mention the case crime number, sections and police station and all. Then herein you write Lucknow dated, the name of the advocate. Thereafter comes your affidavit on which you state the entire facts. In other cases, when we will be making videos on civil matters in PI, we will see that affidavit is filed separately. The petition contains your entire facts, but in bail you say entire thing on affidavit. Then again, Niranjan Verma versus State of UP, case crime number, affidavit. Now affidavit will be sworn in by the person who is his deponent, the person who is doing parody on his behalf. So herein the person, it can be anybody, whether he can be his brother or any near relative. So you have to give his details in the affidavit. The details should include everything, that is his name, age, educational qualification, religion, address. Then you start. So the very first thing that you mention is that the deponent is the parocar of the applicant. This is your very first thing, because see, prior to it you have already mentioned that it is a first bail application, but when you come on affidavit you have to mention who is the deponent and how is he related to the accused. Now then we start in a chronological manner. First of all, you have to mention about the FIR, on which date the FIR has been lodged. So like we mentioned here, applicant has been falsely implicated in the case, because this is your narrative of the story, and when he comes, his paragraph story that is falsely fabricated. So you have to write this thing, that the applicant has been falsely fabricated in case crime number under section so and so, and is languishing in jail from so and so date. Then you have to mention the certified copy of the FIR is being annexed as annexure number so and so. Certified copy of the FIR has to be passed, and if there is no certified copy, then please make a separate application which is for the exemption from filing the certified copy of the FIR. Then you will have to give the details, like the applicant herein he is the husband of the deceased. Then herein in this case, like it is important for you to show that there was a cordial relationship between the husband and the accused. And how in the instant case are we showing it? Because of the fact that when all this threatens or harassment was meted out to her, the husband was not over here. He was in Delhi. When he came to know about it, he left his job and came over here. So all these things go on to show that they were in a good relationship with each other. So all these points should be mentioned. So after FIR you can mention that that they got married on so and so date. They both shared a very good relationship. The husband, used to live in Delhi. When she was harassed by her in-laws, when he came to know about it, he came over here. He left his job, started his own business so he could look after his wife. Relationships were cordial, and they had gone to, various places together to enjoy their time. Then, of course, their relationship were good. A daughter was born to them during this period of time. And also the fact that his relationship with his in-laws was also good. Herein, we have seen in the case that he had given, when his brother-in-law of the accused was in dire need of some money, he himself provided him with the financial assistance. So all these things you have to mention, because in criminal, especially bail, no doubt law plays an important role, but facts also play an important role, because mensia is an important ingredient in criminal cases. And we cannot say that in the instance dowry death case the bail has been given, so in this case also the bail should be given. Because why is it that every case bail application cannot be allowed? Because mensia involved is different. Herein there is no mensia on the part of the accused. Moreover, the burden of proof in these cases is not on the prosecution, it is upon the accused. So you will have to establish, you will have to mention the facts which goes on to show that he would not indulge in such sort of a crime. So we have mentioned all these things, like that they were in cordial relationship, and the allegations are regarding dowry. But what is important to note is that in the FIR, the complainant has himself stated that whatever was given at the time of marriage was given out of their sweet will. They did not force them to give such money. And moreover, this narrative of the FIR, maybe on the phone it has been said, but there is no credible evidence to show that the victim was subjected to any sort of thing. How? Because the medical report states, in the FIR they have stated that somebody rang them up and said that your daughter has been fed with poison. And moreover, if somebody, how do you raise your bail application over it? You can use the point that that the medical evidence contradicts the oral evidence. How? Because in oral evidence they are stating that they have given them the poison. Now just imagine somebody, if he gives anybody the poison, why would that person take that person to the hospital, and why would he ring his relatives and tell them that your daughter is in hospital? So in these cases, what we have seen is that the medical report, the post-mortem report, suggests that there is no ante-mortem injuries prior to the time she was brought to the hospital. So she was not subjected to any sort of cruelty, and moreover, harassment, there is no particular evidence to show that she was subjected to harassment. So these things you have negated. So this strengthens your contention. Moreover, they are stating that on the FIR they are stating that somebody told them, but there is a proof, a screenshot of the call that was made, which goes on to show that it was the accused family who had called the relatives of the deceased and to tell them that the daughter has been hospitalized. You can see it over here. So this is the screenshot. On the 3rd August at 8 a.m. they were the ones who were calling. You can see Bharat Tileri, the name, the person who is the relative of the deceased, of the accused. So these things will strengthen your case. So this is how you draft your bail applications. Whenever a client comes to you, please note down all the facts in chronological manner and then see by what law you can support it. And generally do not cite too many case laws until and unless you think that it strengthens your contention, because as I've already pointed out, mensia involved is different in all the cases. Now we have discussed all these things. Now there is some set pattern. What is important in bail application, that you have to mention about the criminal history of a client. If there is any criminal history, you have to mention it. And if he does not have any criminal history, very good, because that acts as a ground for the bail application. That is why we often quote at the end of the bail application while we are ending it, that the applicant is not a previous convict, he has no criminal history, and he is a very renowned citizen of the society. So there are no chances that he will evade the bail application. Then of course comes your verification, that the affidavit is being sworn by the person who is the deponent, and then his signature, and solemnly all these things are done by the registry. You do not have to worry about these things. And then of course you list your allegations. This is how you draft your bail application. So we have discussed 2 bail applications as of now. If there are any queries, regarding this, the drafting of the bail application in this regard. Any question that you have, any theoretical or practical question, please let us know. We will answer them. So before I wind up this video, I just want to, enumerate some important things. One more thing is that, I've already pointed that the bail applications of the father-in-law and mother-in-law were granted. So you also have to annex those bail applications that the co-accused have been granted bail. So in bail application, what we have to see, you have to mention that from which date the applicant has been in jail. The case crime number has to be mentioned. The sections as mentioned in the FIR and the charge sheet have to be mentioned. Suppose some charges have been added in the charge sheet, so whatever charges are there in the charge sheet, you will have to mention those charges. Then the name of the police station and his criminal history if he has any. When a client comes, jot down all the facts in chronological manner, see what law you can apply to it, and then draft your bail application. See in all these cases, like in dowry deaths and all, the burden of proof is on you. So you have to jot down all those facts by means of which you can prove your innocence. So this is all about the bail application. If there are any queries regarding it, please let us know. We will answer them.